So welcome to the next, hi, Tiana, to our chat on what coaches need to know about high sensitivity on April 17th, 2019. So where I would like to start, if it's okay with you guys, is just to kind of give you an overview of high sensitivity as I understand it and as I work with people around it, and talk about the trait and the characteristics, and then talk about how to manage it in yourself and others, especially clients, including clients, and then talk about, sort of where you came out on the self-test. And then I would love if you guys, since you're both coaches, and just out of curiosity, Andy, you're a coach as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Are you guys certified coaches? Like, where are you at in your coaching career? How long have you been coaching?
I'm about to become certified through CTI. I have my oral exam on Tuesday, actually. So.
Oh, good luck. Nice.
Thank you.
And how about you, Andy?
Good luck. I am certified through the True Purpose Institute and individual and small group coaching, and I'm about to finish my certification for True Purpose Consulting for organizations.
Nice. Okay. So you're working with Tim and I'm trying to think of her name, a good friend of mine whose name I can't remember at the moment, Beth, as well. Yeah. Nice.
Yep.
Good. Okay, so what I would love to do then, if you have any, is to hear if there are any case studies, clients that you've worked with where this has come up. Tiana, I think you said you thought one of yours might have the trait, and talk about, talk through how to work with that and what kinds of things you're experiencing. So that's what I'm planning. Any questions, or shall I just dive right in?
Dive right in.
I'll dive right in. Cool. So, I think I'm going to just mute everybody right now just for the recording. So if anything happens in the background, we don't have to worry about that. And I will unmute you when we, and you, let's see, can unmute yourself. So if you'd like to speak up, just go ahead and do that. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to drop them in the chat, or I will stop, sort of at various points and give you time to ask. And yeah, I think I covered the rest of that. So the first thing I want to mention that you're probably aware of, but I just want to be sure to stress it, is that this, certainly in terms of CTI training, we talk about limiting beliefs. This is not a limiting belief in the coaching sense of that term. High sensitivity is a trait. It's something that we humans, 20% of us humans have. I see it as a gift, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But it's definitely not just like a limiting belief that we want to say to clients, let's figure out a way to get over it, kind of thing. Not that we usually do that anyways, but the reason I've been talking to coaches about this is because I think it's really important for us to understand, if we have clients that feel they may have the trait, how we can help them become more conscious about how they function in the world, and how we as coaches, and maybe even we can help our clients, become more educated about what it means to be highly sensitive, because then they will be able to help people around them who may also be highly sensitive. And for some highly sensitive people, they actually really do suffer because they don't know that, if the lights are bothering them, it's really, it's going to help them to dim them or change them in some way. Or if they notice things that other people don't notice, it's not that there's something wrong with them. It's not that they, are just awkward and should keep their mouths shut. It's actually that they see something that other people don't see, and at the right time and in the right way, whatever right is, but at appropriate times and in ways that people are able to hear, being able to offer that information is a real gift. So that's why I think it's really important that we understand this, because I know for me, before I understood about this, I can't tell you how many times people would say, well, you're so sensitive. or worse, not say it, but just kind of like the look on their face was like, oh, what's your problem? And because we're highly sensitive, guess what? We pick up on that. We notice it. So it makes it really awkward and uncomfortable. So I want to help people understand why they seem to be different. So here are some of the characteristics of this trait. It is innate. It's a temperament. It's found in roughly 20% of over 100 different species. So including humans, but not limited to humans, horses, dogs, animals, insects, birds. Researchers now have studied a lot more about this. And so we understand that actually I think of it as an evolutionary trait that allows these species, our species, these other species, to survive. Because if you're aware of what's going on around you and more highly tuned to what's going on around you, you can point it out to other people or other members of your species and make decisions to help protect the tribe, the group, the whatever. So fully 30% of highly sensitive people are actually extroverts. So if you have the sense, if you have the thought that, oh, being highly sensitive means I'm introverted. Well, actually, no, not necessarily, as a matter of fact. And it can be confusing if you're an extrovert because you're aware of stuff, you're sensitive to stuff, you're noticing stuff, and yet so much of you is out there and doing stuff and, big and live. And you're thinking, what's wrong here? Well, it's that you are also, while you're out there doing your big thing, noticing what's going on around you and absorbing a lot of information that other people around you probably aren't. This trait is equally divided between men and women. So it's not like, women are more sensitive. And it's also not a cultural thing. There's very little difference culturally. So for instance, Asian people perhaps might appear to be more sensitive as a whole, but that may have more to do with the fact that their culture is more welcoming of that kind of person. And so therefore, they may feel more comfortable expressing that side of themselves, whereas here in the States, and Andy, I think you're American as well, aren't you? Yeah. So here in the States, we may be a bit more sort of rough and ready, or, whatever our sort of American trait is. But the point here is that high sensitivity is a capacity to process data, a lot of data. We take a lot of data in, we process it differently than other people do. We notice stuff that other people don't notice. And part of that is that process that's happening means that we're taking in so much that we get overwhelmed. It's like if we're a vessel, we're filling all the time. And if we get too full, then we're going to become swamped. We can't function properly. And so knowing how to be aware of when we're up here and bring that level down so that we can see, we can breathe, we can take our time, we can notice what's going on and make some choices as opposed to reacting. That's part of the whole process of managing and being aware of and managing our high sensitivity. This really is real. It's really a real trait. It's been, extensively researched and well documented now. When Dr. Aaron started, she came. Have you guys seen the documentary that she's done, Sensitive? Okay, great. Andy, you haven't seen it yet? It's available on our website. I think it's worth watching. In fact, I have had some really lovely evenings in my community, showing it like at a church group or at in a group of coaches or whatever, because people see it and they go, oh, is that what's going on? And she looks at people across a range of different kinds of scenarios. So she looks at parents of sensitive kids. She looks at men, who may feel awkward because why am I so sensitive? I'm supposed to be a man, and all that kind of stuff. She looks at business people in corporations. She looks at performers. She does a lot of work in that video with Alana Morissette, who is a fairly well-known, I didn't know her before, but a fairly well-known musician and performs before thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people maybe. And yet she was highly sensitive, and it was really starting to impact her until she understood what she was dealing with and could put some strategies in place to navigate what was going on with her. Anyways, what I started to say was when Dr. Aaron started her research, I don't think there were as many people doing research, or they weren't aware of each other. Now, I think partially in terms of doing the movie, they've connected up with each other, and that's how they've come to understand that it's not just humans. It's over 100 different species, because what Elaine does, Dr. Aaron does, is primarily focused on humans, as far as I understand it. But there are other scientists from other fields who have been doing this research, and so they've kind of independently identified this trait and understood that it really is impacting people and other animals and whatever. So it impacts how we show up in the world and how we relate to each other. And as I've been saying, there are benefits to this trait that aren't always visible at first glance. You know, if you're in a corporate setting, for instance, and it's really competitive, and you're expected to just kind of be tough and, you know, charging along and whatever, and you're actually getting overwhelmed and you need some time to settle out, or you're picking up on some stuff that nobody seems to want to deal with, it can feel like there's, you know, I'm just a problem. But in fact, because you're aware of those things, you can make some choices about, do I take this person aside and have a conversation with them? Do I talk to my boss or to somebody else that might have an influence on this? What are the things that I can contribute? But it takes getting the overwhelm down first so you can make those kinds of choices. Dr. Aaron, and you may be aware of this if you've gone through her website, has an acronym that helps to understand some of these traits of this characteristics of this trait, which are highly sensitive people have got a capacity for depth of processing. So D, the acronym is DOES, D-O-E-S. So the D is depth of processing, which means that we think about the meaning of life, about what makes humans do what we do, about, you know, how we communicate it a bit better. We think about things and process things much more deeply. In fact, that may be one of the reasons, as I've talked with coaches, I've done some sort of informal surveys to see how many people in the room are highly sensitive. And maybe it's because they were self-selecting, but it may also be because coaches, therapists love to have in-depth conversations. So it actually suits us really well for the kind of work that we do to be highly sensitive, because we love that depth of processing. I know I do. The O in the DOES acronym is that we're prone to overwhelm, as I've been demonstrating. So for instance, we get overly stimulated, and then we, again, don't have the ability to respond rather than to react. And so until you can put yourself back into a position where you can respond, your ability is impaired. We do have strong emotional reactions, including, for some people, empathy. For some people who are highly sensitive, they're very far out on that empathic scale. In fact, there's an interesting book called The Sensitive Person's Survival Guide, written by a therapist who, as she was working with her clients, she was going along, you know, she'd done a lot of her own work, processed a lot. She'd been working with clients for a while. And she had this one day where she was starting to have some really weird reactions. She wasn't handling things well. She hadn't slept well the night before. She'd had some weird nightmares, didn't understand what was going on. And at the end of the day, when her last client came in, the stories that this client was telling her were like exactly what she had dreamt the night before. They were the nightmares that she'd had. They were the kinds of things that she was experiencing during the day. And what she realized was that she was somehow picking up. Was having an empathic connection with this client. Now, that doesn't mean that all highly sensitive people are empathetic or have that level of connection. But if you are that kind of person and if you're noticing those kinds of things, there are some other resources out there that you might want to explore. And then finally, the S is subtleties. Highly sensitive people are very aware of subtle things that are happening around them. So we're more likely to pick up on, oh, my client just shifted. I wonder what that means. Or, gee, they've got this line between their eyebrows. I wonder if they're worried or if they're upset, or like we're going to notice things that maybe other people just don't even pick up on. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a room and thought, wow, these lights are really overwhelming and they're going to really exhaust me before the end of the day is done. And nobody else even cares. But for me, and actually when I am able to mention it, oftentimes there are other people in the room that say, oh, I'm so glad you said something. So we notice things, subtleties that other people don't. So again, the DOES acronym is depth of processing, being prone to overwhelm, having strong emotional reactions, and being aware of subtleties. So when data goes into our brains, we process it much more elaborately, much more deeply. We may make connections with other things that other people wouldn't necessarily even think of. We also tend to do better if we pause before acting so that we can be more aware and attentive. It also, of course, helps that settling out of some of the data that's coming at us. If we're able to pause, we pay attention better and notice more of what's going on around us. We are very much more, we will benefit much more from social interaction and social support. If we're ignored or neglected, oftentimes it can impact us more strongly than other people. And in fact, one of the things that Dr. Aaron talks about is if you've had a good childhood as a highly sensitive person, chances are good you're going to be able to go further faster because you absorbed that support. You're much more aware of it. It's much more available to you. On the other hand, if we've had a difficult childhood, it can be harder for us to process that. We'll be more strongly impacted by it. But when we do process it, and I shouldn't have said that. I think that was a misstatement. I don't think it's true that it's necessarily harder for us to process it, but it will impact us more strongly so that when we do process it, we will tend to come up higher than other people who are dealing with a similar kind of issue. Just because we've been down so far, we've taken in so much that we're going to come up higher as well. So particularly if we're impacted by something like PTSD, it can be quite painful. But again, we also have the capacity to come out of it. There is something that she talks about called SPS, sensory processing sensitivity. This is not the same as a sensory processing disorder, so something perhaps like autism, but a sensory processing sensitivity, meaning that we're very sensitive to things that are coming into all of our senses, and we're going to be processing all of that much more than other people. So, for instance, I'm the kind of person that I will blush at very odd times, not understanding why, and I think it's partially because I'm picking up on stuff and aware of stuff that I'm not even quite sure where it all comes in from. I have to kind of work to keep my awareness of, wow, what did I just pick up on? What did I just notice? Where did that come from? What's trying to get my attention? We have strong emotions, by the way, not just in reaction to events, but in anticipation of upcoming events. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but I know for me, if like I'm buying a house right now, doing this call, if I've got a big meeting coming up, if I'm going to start working with another client, I'm going to oftentimes react to that, even if I'm not conscious of it, even if I'm not aware of it. So that these days, if I find myself kind of feeling a bit off kilter or something, I'll think, so what's coming up? Oh, okay, that's what it is. And I can relate to what's coming up and do some self-care. So if you find yourself anticipating upcoming events, That's probably part of the high sensitivity. We often don't like competition all that much. Some of us do. And I actually had a conversation with Dr. Aaron about this because I was curious about it. She made the comment that oftentimes highly sensitive people don't do well in corporations because they don't really like to be competitive. And I said, okay, but I'm curious about that because don't we kind of, like, we have this capacity for noticing, for depth, for, having these conversations that, and looking at stuff in much more depth than other people do. So that, isn't it true that that kind of needs to be fed? And she said, yeah, actually that's, so basically what I took away from the conversation was that as long as we're in competitive situations where we're not getting squashed, where our sensitivity is not getting stepped on, and we're able to do that decompression that we need to do, or it's the right situation for us, actually competition can be a good stimulus. It's just keeping it in balance. So, and because we're going to value work that's meaningful, but not overstimulating for us. So it's got to be stimulating enough to give us the ability to do the thing that we do best, which is process and go into depth, but not so overstimulating that we're constantly overwhelmed and we can't find our feet. Male highly sensitive people, by the way, and Andy, I'm so glad you're with us because I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this, may have really intense, confused feelings, complexes, or warring parts about both their own sensitivity and if they have children, perhaps their sons. There's a really kind of poignant part in the documentary that you'll maybe remember, Tiana, where she's got a couple of actors playing parents, and the child is very sensitive, and the father's really angry because he doesn't want his kid to be a sissy. He wants him to man up and toughen up, and you come to understand later on that actually the father is actually really highly sensitive as well, and has always tried to be really tough. But in fact, the reason that his wife loves him is because he's got this really sensitive side. So sometimes we have to come to our own understanding before we can help those people around us. And that's why, again, I think it's really important for us to talk about this with people and help them be aware of what they may be dealing with, and therefore what some, perhaps their children are dealing with. I love your cat, by the way, Andy. Beautiful.
Yeah, cue the cat, talking about male highly sensitive.
There you go. Maybe he wants to let you know that he understands what you're dealing with. Hello, kitty. Sweet. So again, this may be combined with high sensation seeking. That's what I was talking about before with the competitiveness. And there is a self-test for that. I don't know if you saw it, Tiana, when you were on the site, but there is a self-test for that, for high sensation seeking as well. So let me just stop there. I've been talking a lot. Any questions about what I've said so far? Any comments? Yeah.
That is fascinating that they've expanded the research to all those species. I'm always curious about like how different are we really? I think humans want to really pretend we're like so wildly different than all the other animals, but maybe not so much.
No, maybe not. And I don't know if you're aware of the work that's been done around coaching with horses. Have you explored any of that work?
I haven't personally, but I know that equestrian like therapy, if that's the right term, that's a thing, but I don't know much about it.
Well, there is equestrian therapy. In fact, they do a lot of that with returning vets, as a matter of fact, especially vets with PTSD. But there's also coaching with horses as well, if I understand correct. In fact, I do know that's true. There's a woman here in Tucson, as a matter of fact, Linda Kohanoff, and she wrote a wonderful book called The Tao of Equus, T-A-O, Tao of Equus. And she started to notice that her horses I'm trying to think of how to say this. Um, she was getting information from them and she didn't quite understand what it was all about. But she's done a lot of work around this over the years, and she's come to understand, and she's started to work with people, and her work was some of the sort of groundbreaking work that other coaches have now been building on for quite some time now. That if you do groundwork with horses, not riding them so much as being with them in a paddock or standing with them out, when they're around you, outside, or even perhaps being in a field with them, they can pick up on what's going on with you. They have a capacity for sensitivity. And in my mind, this is part of their high sensitivity. There are certain horses that will stay on the outside of a herd, for instance, and they'll pick up if there's a bobcat or a mountain lion that's threatening the herd, and they will have an immediate emotional reaction that the rest of the herd picks up on. So, in fact, this capacity for high sensitivity, as you say, our ability to study it in other species gives us some insight into what we're capable of. We're capable of being those sentinels on the outskirts of our tribe, of our group, and noticing what's happening and sending the signals. Now, unfortunately, other human beings don't always pick up as quickly as other horses do, but it gives us the ability and the capacity to learn how to communicate and learn how to help people understand what it is that we're seeing, what it is that we're picking up on. So if you want any more information on the working with horses piece, please just let me know. Oh, Andy, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a really fascinating example, because not only might they not pick up on it, but frankly, it's just not respected, I think, generally and I think maybe you're going to talk a little bit about how that relates specifically to masculinity, but I would say just broadly that that's not understood or respected where we are in our evolution as a species.
Right. Well, and where we are in our culture too, because I want to be a little bit careful, because I think there are cultures that do respect it. I don't think ours does as much.
Good point. Yes, many that have that we destroyed, frankly, probably did respect it. That's a good point.
Yeah, unfortunately, exactly. And yeah, I'm sorry. You just triggered off a whole bunch of thoughts in my mind that I want to say them all at once. But exactly, and I think that one of the things that we highly sensitive people need to do, part of the reason I think it's really important that we find each other and talk with each other about it, is that we also have a capacity for using our voice, but we've got to be courageous enough to use them. And so having that support, that social support around us, of other coaches, of other like-minded people, of therapists. I know you're, Tiana, I don't know if you're familiar with the group that Andy is part of, but it's the Gathering for Change Agents, I think is what they call it, isn't it, Andy? And it's very much people who want to make a change in the world. I actually think that Tim Kelly, who is the person that kind of kicked off the Gathering for Change Agents, I suspect he's probably highly sensitive as well, although I've never talked with him about it. I know Beth is. So if we can come together and help each other understand what it is that we are capable of doing and support each other in actually doing it, maybe we can help this crazy old world of ours to continue to evolve.
Cool.
Okay, so here are some suggestions. Unless you have any other comments, I'm going to start making some suggestions for coaches that are working with highly sensitive people, which would include all three of us. Obviously, first of all, educate yourself about the trait so that you know whether to encourage your clients to take the self-test on Dr. Aaron's website, which, as you probably know, is hsperson.com. There are other websites out there. There's a lot of people now who are starting to talk about high sensitivity. Most of them get it pretty right. I know one I saw talked about the gene for high sensitivity. Well, actually, I asked Dr. Aaron about that because I thought, I don't remember her talking about a gene. And she said, there are probably genes that contribute to the highly sensitive trait, but we certainly haven't isolated any. And, ones that we may have originally thought looked like candidates for being part of the high sensitivity trait. Now some of that research has been questioned. So research is an ongoing process. It's not something that's always set in stone, certainly not something that's this new and early in its exploration. So if I hear something like, well, the highly sensitive gene, I'm gonna have to question it. So other than that, though, there's a lot more information out there, and it's great if we can share with each other and help each other understand, what's true and what's not. If those results, getting back to my script here, because I want to make sure that I cover all these points. If the results from the self-test actually resonate, then especially if you have a client, continue to educate yourself and encourage your clients to educate themselves about the trait. And Dr. Aaron, as you probably are aware, has now written a number of books about high sensitivity and highly sensitive people in love. In fact, she's just finishing up a new movie about that, about highly sensitive children, about, there's a lot of different ways that she's started to come at it. So educate yourself about that. I'm actually thinking about putting a course together, just FYI, I was just talking with someone about this today, so it's very new, but I'm thinking about putting together a longer course for business people who are coaches who are working with people who are highly sensitive in different scenarios. What it's like to be a highly sensitive leader, what it's like to be a highly sensitive person on a team, what it's like to be a highly sensitive person that's working remotely, different ways of looking at how this trait kind of impacts us. So there will continue to be more information out there, and obviously educate yourself and encourage your clients to educate themselves. They teach me things all the time, I know. Really important, if you've identified this with a client and they realize that they're highly sensitive, to help them learn how to say no. Setting boundaries is a really important thing for us, especially because of the danger that we're going to become overwhelmed. And if we don't know how to say, you know what, right now I've got to go take a walk, I've got to go to the bathroom, I'm going to take a minute and just kind of breathe even. But being able to say no, whether it's a verbal, external no, or whether it's an internal, I need to take a step back right now. No, I can't do this. Let me just breathe. And one of the things I actually teach my clients is a 1-minute meditation. And it's an open-eyed meditation that you can do with clients, that you can do anywhere you are. So you could be in the middle of the meeting, surrounded by your colleagues, and start to feel yourself getting overwhelmed, and just take a minute and adjust in fact, do you want to try it? Would you like me to teach it to you now? Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to time, just so it's just a minute. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn our attention to, some people use the third eye in the center of your forehead. Some people use the center of their chest, in the sternum between your breasts. Wherever it works best for you, turn your attention there. Keep your eyes open if you can. You might want to kind of glance down if that helps, if having our faces is kind of too much stimulus. And as you're turning your attention to whatever spot you choose, notice your breath and breathe in to the count of 8, hold to the count of 3, and breathe out to the count of 8, and then hold for the count of 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count it just to kind of give you a sense of how slowly I go. And we'll probably have time for 3 or 4 breaths before the minute is up. So starting now, I'm going to count out, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hold, 2, 3, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and hold. 2, 3, and breathe. Hold. And out. And hold. And in. Just finish that breath. So what did you notice when you did that? And I don't know if you guys meditate regularly or not.
I noticed that it just slowed down time.
Yeah. Yeah. Things get more still, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Randy?
Yeah, I meditate every day, but that was a very quick way into just I want to say like a lower frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually the group of people that I learned that from. They're a spiritual group called the Brahma Kumaris. They're spiritual teachers, and they actually in their facility where they live and work, they on the every hour they have a little chime that comes over the loudspeaker, and they do a minute of meditation, and it's lovely because it just reminds you to go into that still, quiet place and allow things to settle a bit. So even if there's stuff going on around you, and I think you may have noticed you could be doing that. Couldn't really tell what was going on with our eyes. We're just kind of sitting there, but we know that we're able to let ourselves settle a bit. So to get back to our clients, teach them that. Simple, easy to teach. Explore with them this capacity to say no. Understand that your own subtle cues. So, for instance, I know one of my issues is that I often have this frown on my forehead. That could be picked up. That my tone of voice, my expressions, even the speed of my speech. These things may have a greater impact on your highly sensitive clients than you realize. So I've tried to get into the habit of asking, what do you think? How's that impacting you? What do you notice? Just to give people a chance to respond rather than me assuming that everything's okay. It's really important, and Andy, I don't know if you talked about this with Tim's approach, but Tiana will be familiar with this. We talk about designing an alliance with our clients so that, for instance, if they pick up on something in your tone of voice or your expression that makes them feel like she must be mad at me today, or I don't know what's going on, or what did I do, or whatever, they will name it. You design it with them to say, look, if you're highly sensitive, chances are good you're going to notice stuff that I wasn't aware of or that I didn't intend. So please tell me what that is. I commit to you that I will find you right, that I will listen to what you have to say and acknowledge that, oh, okay, gee, I wasn't even aware of that, but I can hear what you're saying. So I find them right. And then talk about strategies for dealing with it. What do you need me to do? What would be more helpful for you? What does it bring up for you? Is there something that it would be useful for you to know about? Does this happen for you with other people? Is there a muscle to develop here for you? But so talk about it both in terms of the way you're going to work on whatever happens between you together, and also how you might be able to help them as they're working with other people in different situations. Because obviously, as we know, the coaching scenario is an opportunity for people to practice. And so if we can model the behavior that we're asking of them by acknowledging, naming, noticing, gee, I think I just noticed this. Is that accurate? Tell me what's going on there. And then finding ways to talk about it that aren't judgmental, that aren't, making anybody wrong, either yourself or your client, but that allow us to have the kinds of conversations that will raise awareness and help us to learn to do things perhaps in a way that's more effective. And work with your clients to set up structures so that they can track their own reactions. One, easy one might be journaling in the morning. I had a client that used to carry a little book around in his, just one of these little books with a little small pen that he would take with him. And I said, you know what, Chris, if you notice you need it, go to the bathroom. That's one of my favorite places to go because it gives me that time to step away, close a door, and think, breathe, maybe make a note or two in my journal, help them think about ways that they can track their own reactions, and then strategize with them how to manage those reactions. The ones they can work with you, who is highly sensitive, to figure out ways to work with people who aren't highly sensitive. So for instance, I had a client one time who was struggling with, she worked in a basically all male environment. It was a university environment, but still all of her immediate peers and bosses were men. And she was struggling with communicating with a few of them. And there was some politics going on and some changes happening in the organization and whatever. And so finally one day, as she was talking about, her challenges, I said, okay, here's what I want us to do. Set up a series of chairs in a circle. And in each chair, place one of the people that you're talking about. So each chair represents one of these guys. Once we did that, I said, okay, so what do you want to say to them? They're never going to hear it. I'm not going to tell anybody. You get to let it rip. Whatever you need to say, however you need to say it, whatever tone of voice, just go for it. And she let it rip, things that she would never have been able to say them in person. But as she did that, she started to, I didn't even have to do anything. She just said, that's what I need to do. I have to get those two to talk together, or I need to, get this one out of the room, or I need to, and she started to strategize for how she could work with these guys to get them to understand what she was trying to say. So there are lots of great ideas. You can always put them out to coaching groups or whatever, but think about how to name it, explore it, and put some strategies together for dealing with it. There's something else actually though, when what I was just saying, there's a really useful tool that I learned some time ago, which is awareness, acceptance, and then action. Because sometimes, we become aware of something that's happening. We haven't really fully accepted it yet. We don't really like it. It's a reality that maybe we'd rather ignore. And so sometimes we jump right to action thinking, I don't like this. I'm going to go do something else. Like sometimes we do stupid things like, I'm going to go get a drink, or I'm going to go, punch that person, or I'm going to do whatever. Whereas if we take the time to actually sit with it, that awareness, and accept it, allow it to settle, we can then again respond rather than react and make better choices. So I find that awareness, acceptance, and action to be really useful sometimes to help me get some space. This is probably obvious, but I'm going to say it anyways. Make sure that when your clients share their experiences with them, you acknowledge it. Just oh, I hear you. Or, yeah, I get it. I've had that happen too. Or, I know a lot of people that have shared that same kind of thing with me. It's amazing to me how many times I'll say, I'm not even thinking about it. Oh, yeah, I hear you. And the person on the other end of the phone or computer line will say, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. I didn't think anybody else had ever thought this or felt this way or noticed this or whatever. So just take that extra step and acknowledge what people are saying, because it will help to normalize. It's a therapeutic term, but it's valuable for us. It helps people to realize that they're not alone. And sometimes that in and of itself can be a real weight off of their shoulders. Explore with your clients the impact of things like meditation, which obviously if you do it yourself, even better to be able to say, I do this and this is what I notice. And by the way, around meditation, because for a lot of people, that can be a really loaded word. I know I struggled for years trying to learn how to meditate. And part of the reason I got to know these women that I mentioned earlier was because I just felt like I really needed to know how. And of course, they'll sit in meditation for hours at a time, and I don't have that kind of time. So I figured, I'm just not a good meditator. I stink at it. And then a coach of mine sent around one of these end of the year things one time, and he said, what's something that you could do? We all try to make resolutions at the end of the year. Most of us don't hold true to them. What's something that you could do for 5 minutes every day that's really important to you, that would impact your making a resolution that actually stuck? And I thought, meditation. And I thought, you know what? So if I only meditate for 5 minutes a day, at least I'm doing something. It's better than nothing. So I started doing that. And I will tell you, I was really, and I've noticed this over time. If I get out of the habit, if I'm traveling and I forget, I'm getting up early for some reason and I miss a couple of days, whatever, I notice the difference. And when I get back to it and do it, I notice that I'm calmer. It's subtle, but we notice subtleties. And I notice that there is an improvement in my life when I do that. So help people understand that even if they can't meditate for, a long time every day, 5 minutes, even a minute at a time, could be really helpful for them. Other things you might want to explore with them is things like walking in nature. I think I mentioned that. Journaling, I know I mentioned. Art and creativity. All of these are ways of letting these floods of overwhelm recede. I know for me, very often I'll be working and I'm juggling a lot of stuff. Phone calls are coming in, emails are coming in. I'm trying to remember, oh yeah, I wanted to do that. I forgot about this. Oh, wait a minute. And what about, and when I get up out of my chair and go for a walk, even if it's just a short walk, it's amazing to me how much the overwhelm starts to settle out. So work on that with people and help them find their own ways, the things that work for them. And help them identify their anticipatory emotions. One way to do this might be that if they are talking about a big event coming up, help remind them, so you're probably going to notice some emotions around this in advance of this. Tell me how this has been for you in similar situations. Or, let's look at a situation where this happened before. Can you remember having any kind of, and when you point people to looking at that kind of stuff, often they can remember, oh, gosh, you're right, I never thought about it, but actually, yeah, I hear you. So help them understand and work with their anticipatory emotions as well, so that they can be at their best. They can rest or do whatever it is that they need to do to be able to show up at their best in a given situation or scenario. Work on, some standard coaching things like perspective, detachment, managing negative feedback. If you have any specific questions on any of these, I'm happy to talk about them, but I think these are fairly standard coaching approaches. Is that for all of you? Perspectives, I think, is a particularly important one, particularly powerful one, because I know so often, I'll have a client and they're working away on stuff and they're just can't figure out where to go next. And I take them out of the situation and ask them to think about as if they were walking up a mountaintop. Tiana, you're probably familiar with this from CTI training. Yeah. Going up on the mountaintop and looking back down and seeing what they notice from there. If they see themselves and people around them, what's different that they see from looking down than they notice when they're sort of surrounded by it. So perspective shift I find hugely valuable with people like this. And explore whether your client's ability to sense other people's needs gets collapsed with having the unlimited energy and resilience to be able to actually do so. So in other words, we're, as highly sensitive people, we're sensing stuff, we're picking up on stuff, we're noticing that people might need something or might be feeling something that is painful or difficult. We very often will want to try to help, make something different, make things better. We may be unrealistic about what we're capable of doing. Both because, for instance, if it's somebody that's grieving, nobody can take away our grief. We have to go through it ourselves. And as a highly sensitive person, maybe the best thing we can do is just be present with all of our noticing and with all of our ability to feel, and maybe even with our ability to cry, because maybe it's hard for that person to cry until they see somebody else do it, and then it gives them permission to do so. Or maybe we think, I'm noticing all this stuff going on around me. I'm noticing this is happening at work, and that's happening at work, or that's happening at home, and this is happening with these friends. And I should be, because I notice it, I should be dealing with it. Well, actually, no. That's what I mean by being collapsed. Just because we notice it doesn't mean we have the unlimited energy and resilience to be able to deal with it. And we need to be able to take care of ourselves, put the proverbial oxygen mask on first before we try to help somebody else. Because we're not going to help somebody else if we're overwhelmed and reacting, when really what would be most helpful is a response and helping that other person think through their options and their choices.
I have a question along those lines, actually.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you know of any connection between HSP and just having very high standards, being, perfectionist or very diligent, if there's any correlation there.
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think if I'm aware of anything that Elaine's talked about around that. I'm not aware of it. I'm going to have a call with her, I think, in a couple of weeks, so I'll ask her. In fact, let me just make a note of that. But I'm going to say, just from my own experience, that I wouldn't be surprised, because we notice things and we are aware of subtle things that could make things better. If we just move that chair, it would be,
Mm-hmm.
and if we put that light, like just before
Right.
the call, I can't tell you how many times I moved that stuff that's behind my head, because I knew you guys were going to be looking at it and I wanted it to be just right. Not that it is just right, but we notice stuff, right? And so chances are good our standards are going to be higher than other people's. And I've had people tell me that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I will ask and try to get that answer to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else? Yeah, okay. So one other thing I just wanted to say here, while there may be similarities with disorders such as autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and others, remember, high sensitivity is not a disorder, it's a trait. So the way I think of it is, a trait is something that we have that we can decide what to do with. A disorder is something that's farther along the spectrum. It's something that's more intense, that we may have less control over. Now, I want to be a little careful with that, because I know someone who's done some really valuable work. I'm trying to think of her name, but it's called the Wellness Recovery Action Program. And she had realized that she had ADHD, she had bipolar disorder, and the doctors wanted to put her on medication. And when she found out what the side effects of that medication is, and at the time she was talking about in particular, they were using lithium, and lithium is pretty intense stuff and pretty nasty. She didn't want to go on medication. So what she did instead was develop this approach where she backed up from when she would have these incidents of either mania or depression, which is what bipolar is, obviously manic depression, and think about what preceded those incidents, and then think about how she might strategize to intercept the kind of arc of this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, boom, I'm off, either into mania or depression, and intercept that arc before it gets to that point. So again, because we're highly sensitive, we may be more aware of noticing those things and being able to help people to strategize with that. But it's that something like that is what we, at least today, call a disorder, as opposed to this trait. So I just want to make the distinction between the two. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So anything else on this, about this section, about how you might work with your clients, whether you're a highly sensitive coach working with either a sensitive or a non-sensitive client, or whether you're maybe it's not going to apply to us, but whether you're a non-highly sensitive coach that's working with, or whether you have colleagues who are non-sensitive but coach and maybe working with a highly sensitive person. Anything that you want to sort of talk about or explore around that before we move on?
I actually had an incident with a highly sensitive client recently where she gets very stressed around time management, and it manifested in our session where she got very stressed about, her perception was that we weren't getting to enough stuff in the session, and she kind of had a mini explosion at the end. And it was like my instinct was to want to stay with her, like, oh, let's explore this now. But our session was ending. And I was wondering how you might walk that line with somebody who is highly sensitive, other than, of course, acknowledging it. But it seemed like there was something to do there.
Great. That's a great question. And this kind of goes back to that point that I made about where we might have our ability to notice collapsed with the need for us to do something about it. Mm-hmm. I've had that happen to me before as well, that kind of thing. And what I've had to learn to do, and I love CTI because they train us to do this, is step back and remember that it's not our work to do, it's our clients to do. Mm-hmm. So for me, what I would tend to do is, rather than the temptation, which is to extend the session, and sometimes I have extended sessions, by the way, I will say to a client, if this really feels like it's something that you want to stay with and work on now, we could go for another half hour. I'll just charge you the additional whatever. And I design, I set boundaries around it, and I'm clear with them about what the choice is, so that they can decide, actually, no, I don't think it's that important. I'd rather work on it, myself, or yeah, actually, I really do need to work on this now because it's the meeting's tomorrow or whatever. So first of all, I make it their choice, not mine. And I will work with them to try to identify, if they decide not to continue, or even if they do decide to continue, I will work with them to identify some work that they can do in between that's relevant, that might help them to go deeper into exploring whatever it was that just happened, whether it's journaling, whether it's, finding five other people to do that same thing with and see what happens, whether it's, whatever you come up with that feels appropriate for the situation. And by the way, I think this is relevant here as well. I will very often do my own bit of stepping back to try to understand what my intuition, what my sensitive antennae are picking up on, to notice, what does this client really want right now? Does this person just really need a safe space to vent? Okay, and name that. Or does this person, really need to take some time and go explore? Do they really need to stop and maybe take a vacation or take the night off, or, go read a book or go take a bath. Just trying to be aware of what I'm picking up. Obviously in CTI terms, we talk about what's going on in the levels, levels around us, level 2 and level 3. Obviously, level 1 is, Andy, I don't know if you use this terminology with your approach, but level 1 is what's going on with us. Level 2 is what's going on with the person that we're working with. Level 3 is what's going on around us. And there's actually another one in leadership. I don't know if you've done that, Tiana, but that they talk about level 4, which is kind of what's going on in the world around us as well. So be aware of what's going on and see what your intuition picks up, and be willing to name it. Gee, we just had this thing happen. I noticed that you're really, dealing with some time pressures here. What's up with that? Is that just here now? Is there something that, we need to talk about between us, or is this something that happens to you a lot? Is this something that maybe, you've noticed is a pattern in your life? Those kinds of things. Does that help?
Yeah, it does help. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I hope I answered the question that you asked.
Yeah. You did. I think. Yeah, it was well, in this particular case, it was very much like it manifests in her life a lot. So we knew that it was an issue. And for her, it was just like, I can't deal with this in the coaching as well. Like, I don't want to do coaching if it's going to bring up this stress. So it was like, well, I mean, for me, it was like, okay, if you need to have a break from this, and if we choose to continue, this will probably be something that comes up. So.
Right. Well, and again, this is where I think that's a great opportunity to say, I hear you, and we can put some, boundaries around it, but I will also suggest to you that this is the perfect place for you to learn how to manage this. If this comes up often, if this is a pattern, then this is a safe container in which to learn some ways to deal with it. Now, of course, that assumes that the client is capable and willing to take responsibility for understanding that they actually have some choices. And sometimes people,
right. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes people are ready and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like maybe.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Andy,
yeah. No, I don't think she is at this time.
Yeah. And that's okay. And maybe you just name that and say, whenever you're ready, then, come back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Andy, how about you? Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm just having a reflection on a session last week. And, it's funny. I mean, I find myself very self-aware of just this computer environment. I do most of my coaching virtually. So, and there's just even the slightest shift of the eyes. I think maybe this seems to match up. Maybe it's about 20% of people, but in this particular session, my client, it was just, I would just call them like various stories and judgment about what I was doing, because my eyes were moving around, but it was all related to the session. It was like, well, my notes are over here, and I'm looking at this document over here. And yeah, I think I handled it pretty well, but this has given me a couple of extra tips, even just putting it in this context, because I think in the moment, I think I just met her where she was and just sort of embraced it like I would any observation or judgment or story. But knowing, and I don't know that she's highly sensitive, quote unquote, but now this would seem to open up another door. So I guess that leads to a question of, if it's an environment like that, and I'm noticing some things like that, like, oh, gee, you're calling out the fact that my eye shifted a half a millimeter. So, and maybe you're sensitive. So do you find value then in like giving them the quiz and saying, hey, you know what, and even some of the things you said, like, hey, 20% of people, have this trait, and just really making that a thing, making that an awareness?
I very often will, if someone says something about noise or light or, too many other people or feeling overwhelmed, if I hear that more than once from a client, I will, just say, gee, have you ever heard about high sensitivity? And then say a few things about it. And if they pick up on it, great. And if they don't, the spaghetti didn't stick against the wall. I threw some spaghetti and it didn't stick.
Yeah.
It can be tricky because as you were talking about your experience, and to some extent what you're saying, Tiana, although not quite the same, but I had someone once who came along on a webinar or wanted to come along on a webinar I was offering. And I had set some pre-work that was optional to, ask, I think I said 9 people, like this question. And this person, I'd had other people, okay, fine, no problem. Either they did it or they didn't do it, and it was fine. This person got really upset about it and called me like 3 or 4 times and wanted to know what I meant. And well, but I'm not sure I know that many people that, can do that. And, but, does that mean this, and he was just like kind of obsessive about it. And the more I listened to him, the more I thought, and I, explored a little bit gently and tried to understand what was going on. And what I came to the conclusion after not only talking with him, but then reaching out to other professionals, was that based on some things he'd said about some of his experiences and et cetera, and I got pretty pointed after a while about, have you had therapy and that kind of stuff, was that he actually probably had PTSD, and that question had triggered a PTSD, and that was what it was. So whether or not that person is highly sensitive, if he's triggered, and specifically if he's triggered by me, and we've gotten into a scenario where we're butting heads, chances are not good that it's going to be easy to build the level of trust that he's going to need to be able to continue to do his work. So for me, what I had to do in that situation was learn from my mistake, if you will, or my lack of knowledge, because I'm not trained to work with people with PTSD. I learned a lot from talking to the therapists I talked to, and I put some boundaries in place and said, if you're able to do XYZ, then it will be fine for you to join the call. But if you're not able to do XYZ, then it's going to be disruptive for the rest of the group. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you not to participate. And turned out that he actually wasn't able to, and I had to ask him to leave, and had to manage the impact on the group. It was tough. It was difficult. Those kinds of situations are never pleasant. And for us, particularly as highly sensitive people, we're going to be thinking, what did I do wrong? Could I have done this differently? I noticed that, and I should have picked up on that. I shouldn't have said that, all that stuff that goes on. But I think at the end of the day, we have to be willing to accept that maybe our role is just to make the awareness. Maybe he just needed to bump up against me, because maybe that will point him in a direction to go look for somebody else. Maybe your client, Tiana, is not ready to deal with that, but maybe you've given her enough to think about that she'll go away and it'll be working away in the back of her mind, and then she'll come back when she's ready. So again, I think it's really important for us to self-manage and not take on our shoulders responsibility for everything we're noticing, but just do the best we can with the things that we can be responsible for. Does that make sense, Sandy? Does that kind of relate to what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a little bit more. I want to be sure I get this in before the end of the call, and then if we have any other questions, we can just keep chatting. But I just want to give you a few suggestions for remembering and just kind of remind you that we're going to need to take care, and this is actually pretty relevant to what we were just talking about, we're going to need to take care of ourselves more than other coaches will. We're going to be picking up on a lot more. We're going to be absorbing a lot more, sensitive to a lot more. We may attract people to us who need more from us and want more from us, and we're trying to give it, and we actually can't. So it's going to be really important for us to do our work around boundaries and around self-awareness and around getting support and self-care to make sure that we can be the best coaches we can be for our clients, all of our clients, not just the ones that need the most from us, and for the other people in our lives as well. There's something that Elaine has on her website, which is new, and I love this. She suggests we practice what we call the 5 necessities and mention them to our highly sensitive clients as well, which is, first of all, remember and know, believe that the trait is real and review the research if you doubt it. Excuse me. Number 2, reframe your childhood in light of this trait. So we've been highly sensitive all our lives. It's not something that developed, it's something that we were born with. So given that, we will have had interactions with people who didn't understand, we didn't understand. It's important to go back and reframe those experiences and those that what you learned, what happened to you in light of this, to get clear. Oh, okay, so that's why I always felt awkward when I went to high school dances and my friends just, hung out with boys and flirted and, did all the stuff that normal kids did. Because I was noticing stuff that I wasn't able, or I didn't know how to process it. I was too naive, and I didn't know how to talk to people about it because I wanted to go real in depth and they wanted to be superficial and light, and I couldn't figure out how to say it without feeling like a jerk. Right, so if we can begin to process some of those kinds of things, then we can begin to get more comfortable in our own skin. Really important to heal from the past wounds. And I know Tim talks a lot about wounds, Andy, so I know you will be dealing with a lot of this kind of thing, because we are what Elaine calls differently susceptible. We're going to be picking up on stuff, and it's going to impact us more. As I said before, whether we came from a good environment, quote unquote good environment, or a difficult environment, whether it was in our childhood or whether our life circumstances have put us into a challenging situation now, we're going to be more affected by it. So we need to honor that and take better care of ourselves and get the help, get the support that we need, work with therapists that understand us. And if you work with a therapist who doesn't know this trait, either be willing to educate them and ask them to educate themselves, or find another therapist that does. And Dr. Aaron has a lot of people listed on her site that have gone through her work and gotten certified as therapists that can work with highly sensitive people. And by the way, if you're not aware of it, she also has a space for coaches who have done that same thing. She has a process that you can go through, which I found really useful to help me get more familiar. Because when I first found out about this in the 90s, to be honest, I did awareness action. I got aware of it. I didn't like it. I tried to ignore it. It took me a long time to get to the acceptance point. And when I finally did, and then I went back and did the work to become certified as a coach that can work with highly sensitive people, I noticed that this stuff was like happening all around me. I was being sort of reacting to it, and I'd forgotten how to stay in touch with myself. I'd forgotten how to stay connected with myself. So really important to make sure that you are keeping aware of what's going on with yourself and healing yourself and getting support for things that are challenging for you. And don't try to live like the other 80%. Give yourself the benefit of knowing that we're 20% of the population. There are going to be people like us out there, but there's also going to be people who don't understand us, and a lot more of them. So be willing to find your tribe and keep them close to you, and let the other 80% live their lives the way they do it, and don't feel like you have to try to as well. And she suggests that you be with a group of other HSPs at least once to see how different we are, to experience what it's like to be in a group of people who are so similar to us. I know for me, it was really, I did that, and it was really valuable. It felt a little awkward. I kind of didn't want to accept that I belonged in this group, and yet I also knew that I did. So, and try to have some highly sensitive friends, because they're going to be the ones that are probably going to get you better than anybody else does. Reduce your work time on the order of, she suggests not more than 20 hours a week. Now, well, I'd love it. I know, right? If I could do that. But if you can reduce your work time and give yourself breaks, take a long lunchtime, go for a walk, start slowly in the morning, take breaks at night, whatever it is, just so that you manage how much you work. Screen your clients. It's really important that you not take the difficult ones, Jan. It sounds like maybe you've got one that just isn't really the right one for you. Maybe the solution is to refer her to another coach. That might, I don't know. I don't know the situation, but be willing to screen your clients and let go of the ones that really aren't your favorite people to work with, because there are other people out there who are really going to benefit from what you have to offer. Make sure you take plenty of downtime, so that you can avoid, serious errors, illness, depression, ruining an important relationship. Ideally, some of this will be right after you finish seeing your clients. If you are going to be with family right after you see your clients, make sure that they understand that before you join them, you need a little bit of time to yourself, to lie down, to meditate, to walk by yourself, whatever it is. Be willing to limit your social life, especially if you have a family or if you are an introvert. And because I don't know if you know this, but the thing that's different about extroverts is that they actually get recharged by being around people, but introverts get drained by being around people. So if you're a highly sensitive introvert, you need to give yourself time and space away. Maybe if you're a highly sensitive extrovert, you actually need to be with people. Understand about yourself, track it, and figure out what you need to give yourself the downtime, the support that you need. Don't take your work home. Be sure you charge enough. I find this so often with coaching clients that they don't charge enough money, even though they're saying things to me like, oh, I've got so many people calling me and I don't know what to do because I don't really want to work with them because I've got enough people already, but I'm like, how much are you charging? You need to raise your rates, because if you've got people coming after you and you don't have enough time to take care of yourself, you don't need to be working that hard. You need to be working with people who really get you, and you need to be charging them accordingly and letting go of the rest and let somebody else work with them, because somebody else would love that work and you don't need to do it to yourself. So be sure you're charging enough so that you are honoring the time and the energy that you're giving, and so that they understand that they're paying for something that's actually really important in their lives. For some people, it can be as important as a college education. So it's not the time to let empathy get in your way, because you need to have boundaries and you need to role model them with your clients. Because that's this really becomes a matter of ethics. It's the only way you can do a good job with the people that you've contracted with. She also suggests, and I love this, and in fact, that's why I'm working with her now, to find a good consultant. To be worth what you charge, it's important to have someone who understands the work that you're doing and who can give you feedback, bring you up to date on the latest research, help you hone your skills. Andy, you're working with Tim. He's a great consultant, or Beth, or any of the other sort of senior folks in that group. She suggests private consultation over group consultation, but make it be someone that if you need to, you can contact them by phone and hear back in 24 hours. Because again, if you're doing it in a group, it can not meet your needs, and you can in fact get so much stimulation from other people it actually does the opposite and causes problems. So find a one-to-one consultant if you're able to, and seek out. Yeah, go ahead.
When you say that, do you mean a consultant on HSP, or what kind of consultant?
If you're working with HSP clients specifically for a reason, then yeah, absolutely. Or maybe it's a consultant that works with, I don't know, something specific about the kinds of people that you're working with. But just basically think about what kind of clients you're working with and what kind of consultant would benefit you. And chances are good it's going to be more valuable if that consultant is someone that's highly sensitive as well. So even if they don't know it, even if you may have to educate them, chances are good if they're a professional at that level, they'll pick up on it really quickly. They'll benefit, you'll benefit, and they can help you with whatever the specific, arena is that you've approached them in. So it may or may not be someone who's a highly sensitive consultant in terms of that being their specialty, but I would suggest that you want a consultant who is also highly sensitive. Yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So as a consultant as opposed to a coach, or just like more of a mentor coach?
She said, this is from her website. So she said consultant, mentor coach, I think would work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that I think when she uses that term consultant, that's more of a therapeutic term. That if you're working in a particular type of therapy, for instance, PTSD, you would want a consultant who's experienced in trauma, that kind of thing. I think that's what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Seek out your own therapist, even if it's expensive, because it helps to make you worth your fees. And then you can charge those higher fees that will benefit you and actually will benefit your clients as well. Take frequent vacations. She says, especially if you have attachment or separation issues, because you can be really hooked by your clients having those issues. So help them learn to practice letting you go on vacation, dealing with what comes up, either with you or maybe they need a substitute coach for a while. I've done that before. So that you're role modeling good boundaries and you're taking care of yourself. I think that's it. We're right close to the end of time. Do you have any comments or questions? Or I'm sorry we didn't get more time to talk at the end, but we did do some talking in the middle. How would you both like to end the session, which has been fun for me? I hope it has been for you as well.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Good. Thanks.
I did have one question about, at one point you were kind of modeling that self-questioning. It's like, oh, should I have done this? Should I have done that? And it seems like that can really contribute to the overwhelm. But like, what is that about? Is that like a combination of being empathetic and like wanting to do the best you can, or like, is that inherently an HSP quality?
I notice for myself that when I've got lots of questions going on, I tend to think of it as I'm either aware of what's going on around me and I'm asking questions about it, or I'm anticipating something that's coming and I'm asking a lot of questions about it. And what I try to do is somehow corral those questions. Either write them in a journal or write them down on a list or talk to a friend about what's going on to try to get a sense of containment, if you will, around them, so that I'm not just going off, and going, but so that I can do something productive with them. Mm-hmm. That's how I tend to manage that. I would encourage you to notice how you tend to interact with and work with that scenario in your own life. Maybe do this with a coach, and figure out what works for you, because I think we each are going to come up with our own strategies and our own approaches based on who we are. This actually lets me say one last thing that I just want to say. To me, being highly sensitive is a form of diversity, and we're each different. It's not about like putting us in categories. There's some value to that, but even within those categories, we're all each individual different people. That to me is what diversity is all about. And so in my mind, the answer to that kind of a question is always going to be learn from other people, but ultimately figure out your own answer that works best for you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Anything else? Andy, you've unmuted.
I wonder, at one point, it sounded like you were going to say something specific about highly sensitive men, but I'm not sure if we went into that or.
Yeah. Is there a specific question around that, or what would be helpful?
Not just specifically. No. One of my colleagues actually focuses in that area, and if you do another one of these, I'll probably suggest he checks it out. Or.
Okay, great. And I
like
probably will, by the way. I'm going to do one for the general public, actually. So if he wants to come to one that's for the general public, that's going to be in May. And then I'll probably do more for coaches in the fall. And I may well put together, as I said, a course. I'm still debating if I have the time to do it, but if I do, then it wouldn't be until probably next year sometime. You know, I think the biggest thing around men who are highly sensitive is understand it in yourself and find other men or be willing to talk to other men who can talk with you about their experiences. It's kind of hard for me to address that, I suppose, because I don't have your experience of the world. So I can talk about it in sort of general terms, but I'm not sure I'm the best person to give you specific answers, if that makes sense. So again, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's fine. I may have misinterpreted it. So earlier it sounded like that was maybe going to be a subject, or maybe you were just commenting on the fact that I'm here representing that.
No, I think I did. I think you're right. I think I did kind of lead you to think that I was going to say more about it. And as I think about it, I'm not sure if I have a whole lot more to say. Certainly not in, you know, sort of the last, now that we're kind of over time, I don't want to hold you guys up. But what I will say is if you have any specific questions, please feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy to talk with you about them. I'll send you a follow-up email that has the recording and that also invites you to my mailing list. So if you want to be on my mailing list, you're more than welcome. And I will announce, obviously, other calls coming up. I will also say, Andy, that in fact, the person that introduced me to this idea, this awareness, was a man. And in fact, the coach that I had that also helped me understand more about it was also a man. So I think there are, you know, half of that 20% out there are men. There's a lot of you guys out there, and I think the more you can talk about it, spot it in yourself, then spot it in other people, then the more you can start to build your own muscles around, you know, what does this mean and how can I work with it for myself and my clients?
Yeah, I think there's an emergence, and I think that it, to your point about it being a gift, can be part of the antidote to toxic masculinity, or however we want to describe the general state of masculinity. So
yeah, absolutely. And you know, it may be that that's the reason that things are happening the way they're happening right now, is because it's bringing us to a, you know, kind of a crisis point where our ability to help people understand just how toxic some types of scenarios are might actually help us move even further.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So I'm thrilled that you're doing the work that you guys are doing, both of you, but Andy, you in particular, because of that masculine thing. And I just encourage you to learn as much as you can and bring as much of it as you can into your work with your clients.
Well, thanks for getting the word out.
My pleasure.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
All right, you guys, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, bye for now.